Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules, and most of all, for signing up to be Grants for Change readers this year. So excited about the group of readers we have. Just for those who don't know me, my name is Julian Rowand. I use he and pronouns. I am with Maine Initiatives. Today, I'm wearing a blue shirt. I have a beard that is graying by the hour. I've got long hair pulled back today. Um, and I am joined by my colleague, Bree Chamberlain. And Bree will be here to help also to support. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to Bree directly in the chat. Also, maybe it goes without saying, but too, for our hour today, please take care of yourself as you need. Feel free to go off camera. I know people are doing a lot of things, so just really happy that you were able to take some time to join us today to learn a little bit more about this process. If you, and many of you, are longtime readers here, you also will get the benefit of connecting with some folks in this room. Amazing group this year. So yeah, welcome again to this process. This is kind of like the unofficial kickoff of Grants for Change process this year. So really excited for you to be here. We're gonna record this to be able to share with other readers who weren't here, just to let you know that that's happening. We will also share the material from this as well with you afterwards, so you have that. Don't need to retain everything from our time together. And we will probably have more people join as we go, so just be prepared for that too. There will be hopefully ample time at the end for questions. I always say that, and then there are like 5 minutes left at the end, so I'll try to manage time appropriately this time. But please know we are available to answer questions. Feel free to put them in the chat as we go, and we'll circle back to them at the end. Or if it's something that's not maybe more relevant to the general reader pool, then feel free to reach out to us as well. Okay. All right, let's get started. Let me share my screen with you. All right. Everybody see my screen okay? Yeah, we good? Awesome. All right. So for our time together, oh yeah, question, Samson. Did you have?
Sorry, I don't. Sorry,
No
it's a
worries.
new thing on Zoom. I found it. I
Okay,
couldn't see your
cool.
screen at first, but
Thank
I
you.
got it. Thanks.
Great.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, but thanks for speaking up. Okay, so for our time together, we're going to keep it pretty simple. I want to make sure to get you the information that you might need to do this process. Yeah, so we'll do some welcomes as we are doing now, some introductions both into our work if it's new to you, but also have some time to connect with the folks in the room. Part of the purpose of this is also community around supporting racial justice work in what's now called Maine, or so-called Maine, so Wabanaki territory. So want to give some time for that too, to learn about who else is engaged in this. Share a little bit about our vision framework here with the Grants for Change program. Again, we hope that that will also resource you as you are doing your reads and reviews of the applications. We'll talk about the process and where we're at in the process, how it's going to work if it's new to you, and the next steps, and then questions. All right. So who we are. Many of you are familiar with Maine Initiatives, but there may be a handful for whom Maine Initiatives is new. Just to say, we were founded, a couple decades ago now. right? With this commitment to social, economic, environmental justice, supporting grassroots work. Over the last 10 years, though, our focus really has been about racial justice. We've made that commitment for the last 10 years. We are currently doing that work to support racial justice efforts, again, across Wabanaki territory, what's now called Maine, through these 5 major programs. So this is the Grants for Change program. It's our oldest program. Until about maybe 6 years ago, it was our only grant-making program. And since then, we have added Immigrant-Led Organizations Fund. And I'm excited to say this was the first year that that's been a participatory grant-making process as well, led by my colleague Shima Kabarigi. We had an incredible grant-making retreat this past weekend. So we'll be announcing the first cohort of the Immigrant-Led Organizations Fund as a participatory process soon. This fall, we are launching our Giving Project. And if this is something of interest to you, would love to talk to you about it more. It's a donor organizing model that is shared by, think about 8 or 9 peer grassroots funders across the country supporting community organizing. Okay, so it's for those of you who are ready to go a little deeper in this work. It's going to be, we're going to have a group of 15 to 20 peers meeting about once a month to do some deep work around race and class and wealth, and then to fundraise for community organizing groups collectively. So building, like literally building movement infrastructure. So thrilled about that. We also have MaineShare, which is our workplace giving program, as well as the Outdoor Equity Fund, which funds BIPOC-led racial justice and the intersections of racial justice and nature-based learning and outdoor equity. So that's how we do our work. Through our programming, we really see our work as this intersection between community organizing, community philanthropy, and justice. This is a photo of the Grants for Change, many, not all, but most of the Grants for Change grant-making advisory committee members from last fall. So we'll talk a little bit more about our model and how that's different. And for many of you, this is a review again, but right, in terms of a grant-making committee, it was, I want to say 40 people last year, all of whom were readers. And we'll talk a little bit about how that committee is made up and also how this reader process in general really, really informs that piece of the process as well. All right, so this is just a little bit about what we mean about community philanthropy, which, whether you know it or not, you are a part of this now, okay? It's a different way of doing philanthropy. It involves community effort, okay, to identify, mobilize, leverage resources, okay? We strongly believe that there is enough out there, okay? There is enough, right? But we need to tap into it, and you're a part of that. All of that is mobilized to strengthen and support organizations that are doing work on the ground with the hope of building an ecosystem for change, right? We believe that money is necessary, but not sufficient for the kinds of change that we need, right? So this whole process is designed around mobilizing our full range of resources towards that end. And finally, about what we do, just to say, we believe in centering those who are most impacted by our work as a funder and an organizer in this process. And what is that? How does that translate? Does translate into those who are ultimately making the decisions will be overwhelmingly members from the past cohorts that have been granted through this program, right? So now those people are the decision makers, and also centering Black and Wabanaki voices in those ultimate decisions of the grant-making committee. So that's a little bit about us, main initiatives, how we work, how we move. Again, that was probably review for most of you, but just to sort of ground for those who are new, like who we are. Um, Now I want to give an opportunity for you to connect to the other amazing people that are in this room as well. This is part of building our ecosystem. All of you are have shown commitment uh, to supporting racial justice work, and it's important for you to know who else is committed to that. So if you are able and willing, we are going to break into some breakout rooms of 3 or 4. I should share my screen to share the prompt again. And let's see. Let me share my screen just one more time to share the prompt with you that we're going to be moving into. And then you'll have to bear with me as I send you into rooms. As many of you know, if you attended the last reader info session, tech is not my forte. So you'll just have to work with me a little bit as we do that. But here's the prompt. So in groups of 3 or 4, in a minute or two, if possible, share your name, pronouns, and where you are currently located. Please, and then really the prompt is to please share briefly about a person, an event, or moment that has inspired your commitment to supporting racial justice efforts. Okay, it can be a mentor of yours that politicized you, a moment where you sort of the light bulb went off for you, or an event that catalyzed this energy that you have clearly to supporting a racial justice effort, or you wouldn't be here. So in your group of 3 or 4, just see if you could share briefly about what person, an event, or a moment that's inspired you to this work. And I'll have Bree share those in the chat. And I'm gonna attempt to break everyone out here into breakout rooms. So a minute or two each. Let's see. And I think we're gonna, we'll be in those rooms for about 10 minutes. And all right. And if there's any issues, again, tech-wise for me, just chat me, let me know. And hopefully this works. All right. And I think Bree's put into the chat those prompts really about what's catalyzed you, what's politicized you. And we'll come back in about 10 minutes or so. Okay. Looks like everybody's back. Just a show of hands, raise your hand if you met somebody new in your group, connected with somebody new. All right, I'm seeing almost everybody's got a hand up. Awesome, awesome. All people committed to supporting racial justice work. I think it's great to do like introductions with some things that can be like warm and fuzzy, and you get to know more about folks, right? About their summer plans. And you all have also committed to doing this thing around racial justice. Okay. So I just felt like probably appropriate too to like get to know what's motivated folks in their lives, right? To resource each other around that and to hear maybe a little bit of story around that. So I hope that was enjoyable, connective in this process for you. Appreciate you being willing to do that, to meet new people and to share a little bit around what politicized you in the world. Oh, James, I had put you in with Linda. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Uh, you probably know each other pretty well and know what politicized each other. Uh, and maybe you learned something new. Maybe you learned something new. All right. Well, thanks, y'all. All right. Um, let's continue. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Grants for Change program. This will be a lot of information. All of this information that I'm going to share right now, you can find in the funding opportunity announcement, which is our announcement that went out to potential applicants, okay, to tell them about the Grants for Change program. So it'll give pretty much the same stuff we're going to talk about now. So know that that's there as well. But I want to just speak it into the space so it's fresh too as you start to get into the applications. Okay, so you get a sense of what our framework is. It's been informed by community and it's iterative too. So every year we are developing this. And we have the great benefit of now having 2 cohorts selected by this community-based process. And then the work that those groups, so those 24 organizations, have also structured this framework as well. So I'm going to share my screen again. It's going to be a lot of information. If you need to take a deep breath before we jump into that, I'll try not to rush it, but I also want to leave time for questions at the end. So here we go. All right. We good? See my screen here? All right. So this is going to be review for some of you, but we also have a lot of new folks in the room today. So very briefly, Grants for Change program at Maine Initiatives. All right. Since 2016, okay, we've been doing our Grants for Change program here at Maine Initiatives. And let's see, let me just make sure before I jump into this. All right, here we go. So Grants for Change, again, since 2016, we have been focused on supporting racial justice work across the state. Grants for Change funds and strengthens BIPOC community-based efforts. So that's Black, Indigenous, and or people of color-based efforts led and serving in Wabanaki territory, unceded Wabanaki territory, okay, through funding and relationship building opportunities like we've talked about. We've funded since 2016, 74 organizations, and we're getting close to about $4 million that we've been able to move into and supporting that work. Just want to note the term BIPOC is, you know, it's what we have. It's not perfect. It's certainly, there's a lot of apples and oranges in that. But the sense is we're trying to support groups that have been historically marginalized from funding and resources. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here. So what we do, that's the Grants for Change program. This is what it is. We've made a 3-year commitment starting 2 years ago to fund every year 12 organizations or groups. These are multi-year, so 3-year grants, general operating grants, $45,000 total, so $15,000 a year. There's no reporting requirement. We do that. This is part of our values, right? So that if you're taking the time to apply and you get selected by this broad participatory process, community has selected you, you don't have to apply again for two years or what, 3 years really, right? So you can focus on the work that you're doing, at least in terms of our funding. We prioritize Black and Wabanaki-led groups. I'll speak more about why shortly. All BIPOC led and serving efforts are welcome to apply as well and will be considered and have been funded through Grants for Change. Welcome, Arthur. Arthur just joined. Thanks, Arthur. Um, and so Black and Wabanaki-led efforts are prioritized. We're also focused on community building and community organizing through this. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by hub and emerging organizations. Essentially, we want to fund across the spectrum of organizational development. We have a grantee cohort approach, right? So we're selecting 12 organizations a year. And through that as well, we're providing opportunities for those organizations to be in relationship with one another. And finally, this participatory process, which is different than most grant making and is also just a really exciting model as I've traveled the country and talked to other regions, like they're really excited about what we're doing here. So it includes a advisory board. We've got a steering committee. We've got a grant making advisory committee, all of community members and have different roles, and then this multi-day grant making retreat. Who we fund. And again, this is all in the funding opportunity announcement. And Bree will be, if she hasn't already, shared links. But we want to fund groups or organizations working primarily in Maine, primarily or implementing programs that advance racial justice. And every year we learn more about what that means here in the state. Serves BIPOC communities, led by BIPOC leaders. And then final sort of criteria there has an organizational operating budget of under 2.5 million as well. I believe, yeah. So if you've participated in the past, right, you have had a key role in the selection of the 2 cohorts so far that we've had in this 3-year commitment. So on the screen, you'll see on the left there, that's the group that was selected, the cohort selected in 2022. And then on the right, the cohort that was selected last year. So if you participated in the past, thank you. This is an amazing list of groups that are doing work across the state around racial justice. We are learning from them. We are following them. We're supporting this work. We ask you to learn and follow and support their work. So this is so far the 24 organizations that have been selected. And I'll just note too, as you're preparing, and we haven't obviously sent out any applications for review yet. We get asked, how can I prepare myself? One way, you can go on our website. We have all of our grantees there by program. Look at some of these organizations, especially the ones that you don't know. They will be a great teacher for you in terms of also how to read some of the applications for this year as well. Here are the effort areas. Just a summary, just like thematically of what's being supported through Grants for Change currently. This will also change this year too. There's an amazing group of applicants that will also teach us more about the work that's happening. But so far, everything from tribal sovereignty efforts, land back efforts, legal equity, prisoner advocacy work, youth justice, definitely groups doing organizing, community care and healing, culturally sensitive work around recovery, mental health, groups that are doing also cultural organizing, okay, around storytelling or oral traditions or theater, the arts certainly, and also food justice work, also crucially important. And of course, education, youth leadership and empowerment, and also around environmental justice, right? So we have been learning over the last 2 years just the breadth of work that's involved in racial justice here. Not theoretically, right? This is the work that's happening. I'm going to go quickly through this last part to make sure we have time for questions, but few things I want to note. We do the process this way and have these focuses to be attentive to this sector that we work in, to philanthropy. All right. We feel like it's our duty to respond to the history of harm that has been philanthropy in this country. Right. Thinking about the creation of wealth. Don't need to get too far into this now because I could definitely go on for a bit, right? But just to note, right, wealth in this country vested in legacies of white supremacy, colonization, slavery, genocide, right? All of those legacies are still affecting us today. Obviously, don't need to tell you all that, right? So through the Grants for Change program focused on racial justice, right? This is our responsibility to address that history in the present. It's imperfect, all right? This process, you do a process like this, broad participatory process involving a lot of folks, community, it can be messy, and we think it's absolutely worth it and necessary to do it this way. So just need to note that too, and how we move and what we're responding to. This has informed our vision of this work. Okay, so we are trying to respond to the effects, intergenerational effects, current effects of anti-Black racism in this country, and also histories, right, and contemporary realities of settler colonialism experienced by generations of Wabanaki in this land. Right? Our way of acknowledging this history is this organizing, okay? Is this mobilizing of resources and people, and obviously folks that are in this room that are doing this as well, committed to this, right? So this is what we're doing together. Some of our analysis, and again, I just note this so that you can keep it in the forefront too, if this is helpful as you are reviewing applications about, we're looking at what's the work that addresses the root cause. All right, we're trying to get to root cause work. We're trying to address the foundational injustices, as I mentioned, right, of chattel slavery, genocide. We feel like those are imperative also to deal with these broader social, economic, environmental justice, right? It's all intertwined. To address the pervasive and persistent realities, okay? And also to note too, historically, Black and Wabanaki or Indigenous efforts have been undervalued and underfunded in Maine, continue to be, if you look at all of the funding out there. So we feel like we have a particular role to play in addressing that. So here's our framework, our funding framework. You'll be able to find this in those links provided, also the reader opportunity announcement, the funding opportunity announcement. So this is our commitment through community-based design to strengthen organizations that are working at the systemic level, okay, that are focused on movement work, community building, grassroots work, to strengthen that work that's happening in community, and that are led by those who are most impacted, in this case, the Black and Wabanaki communities. All right. And just to note, I guess, too, about, right, our role. And I feel like in philanthropy, it's very careful, or it's very important for us to be clear about our role, especially when it comes to addressing persistent racial injustice. A lot of this work is not the work that's going to be supported by the state and the status quo. I hope, again, in a room of people that have committed to supporting racial justice, maybe that's obvious, but I feel like I need to name that too, right? We're trying to fund work that oftentimes is gonna rub up against status quo and probably is not going to be supported by the state that is largely invested in retaining structural inequality. Again, what that looks like here, just some examples, as mentioned: abolitionist efforts, advocacy work, tribal sovereignty, obviously, and important to note, joy and liberation, Black joy and liberation too, right, through this work. It's crucial. All right, maybe take a breath, a lot of information. Here's the last piece, and then we're going to get into the reader process, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions here. So here's the journey. We put out our funding opportunity announcement, reader opportunity announcement, right? Readers, you are a subsection of our amazing reader pool. You are going to resource this whole process through the 3 applications that you read and review. And this is how it works. Okay. So, and we'll be saying more about this shortly too, in terms of next steps. But the next thing will be, we will send you a conflict of interest form. It's a Google form with a list of the organizations that have applied. We are still in the process of determining eligibility for a few, but you'll probably get a list that has all the organizations that have applied, even the ones we're still trying to figure out. You'll let us know which ones you have a conflict with, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Then you'll have about a month to do those 3 reads and reviews, okay? You'll see in a second there are enough readers where each application, I hope, will get between 15 and 20 reads, okay? That'll be both some quantitative scoring on a scale, but also crucially important are your comments and observations, okay? We'll take all of that, okay, and then bring all of that information and reflection, review to the grant making committee, okay? The grant making committee then will have access to all of the applications, will get the benefit of all of your reads and your comments and reviews to inform them to make the decision about the cohort for this year. So in terms of the process, designed, really led in a lot of ways by community, informed by community over the years. This year, we received 38 applications. We have approximately 250 readers. And like I said, that means about 15 to 20 reads per application, which is huge. So it's also an opportunity for those 250 readers like yourself to learn about the work that is happening. We also use some of those reviews or comments that you have anonymously to be able to provide feedback for organizations who aren't selected. I mean, some that are selected ask for this as well, but if they're not selected for this year's cohort, we invite them to reach out and have a conversation, and then we can also share, again, anonymously, hey, peers who are in this work, read your application, here's some feedback that they have, which is always really valued by those who are applying. So even if they're not selected, they both get their work to be read by peers like you, and oftentimes get great feedback, okay? This year, we're planning on having a grant making committee of probably between 50 and 60 people. Last year, we had 44, I think. And I think we're going to have maybe 50 plus this year that'll get together for a 3-day retreat in November. Majority BIPOC group, also prioritizing those from the 2 cohorts that you just saw, or the 2 years of funding. So representatives from those organizations also prioritized for that committee. We'll get together for 3 days to look at all of the reads that you've done and the comments that you've given, and that will inform them in their decision-making process. And then we'll announce the cohort first week in December. And just a little bit about who will be on that grant-making committee and in that space. Like I said, grantee organizations, there will also be a few of the current applicant people that are connected to the current applicants there. They're invited to come as individuals. We'll only invite people who have shown a commitment to broaden or to the ecosystem as a whole. It can be a tricky spot for groups, but we also believe that part of the process should be accessible to them as well. Um, Individuals with proximity to the work. There will be some donors or funders in the room as well, right? We are also trying to organize the sector around racial justice. So that retreat is, we're transparent about it. It is an organizing space, okay? Yeah, so that's who's going to be at the retreat. I wanted just to share briefly about, what people have experienced, right? Or what they're interested in, right? We've had people say that they want to learn more about what's already happening in the state, want to be challenged to engage in ways that they may not have in the past, to build connections with others doing this work, to support Indigenous sovereignty here in Wabanaki territory, and to learn more about the ways that they can support BIPOC people and orgs in shifting resources. This is what we hear from folks. Another person has shared that they hope to be changed as a person. And our hope too in you as readers and opening yourself to reading, and in the process will be changed by this process as well. So here we are. This is where you come in terms of the reads, the evaluations that you're going to do. This is what it looks like. Let me just pause there, just to take a breath. I know that's a lot of information, but I'm just going to pause for a moment. So we talked about the process up until this point, and the next steps that'll happen. You'll get a conflict of interest form. The evaluation that you will be asked to fill out will look like this. Let me just share my screen again briefly and be focused in these areas. All right. So the evaluation that you're going to be asked to fill out, we keep it really simple, really basic, and they're tied to the questions that we ask on the application, and they really center around these 4 topics. The organization. So the ask is, what's your impression of this organization? Is its mission clear, important and timely? We ask about the work. Does this organization's programmatic approach make sense? Okay. Will the work that they're proposing or that they do bring about the impact that they seek? There will be 4 questions about racial justice on a scale. And then finally about success. And we allow the organizations to define success for themselves and to share an anecdote, a story about what success looks like to them. For each of those 4 questions, there will be a scale, a rating scale. So for example, for the organization, you see the example here. You'll be asked to select one of the following. Is this an inspiring, or this is an inspiring organization? Okay. Or it appears to be a good organization, not necessarily inspiring, but it appears to be good. And then if you're not really impressed with it, then that's what you select too. Okay. Each of the ratings for the questions are different, but similar. And then for each of the questions, there's an opportunity to provide comments or observations. Again, crucially important to the broader process. All right. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm hopefully resourcing you to do this next step over the month. So here's next steps. Okay, so definitely review both the reader opportunity announcement for readers, which you probably have seen. Take a look at the funding opportunity announcement for the organization so you can see what they were looking at when they applied. We will be sending the conflict of interest form to you. On the conflict of interest form, you'll see how we define conflict of interest. And just to note, it's very simply if you or say immediate family would directly benefit from that organization getting selected from this grant. especially in social change work, can be a small place. We assume that you've probably heard about a lot of the organizations, maybe even connected in different ways, but that very basic level is how we define conflict of interest. Once we receive that back, and we'll be sending the conflict of interest by the end of this week, once we receive your conflict of interest, then we can assign the 3 proposals to you to read and review. We ask you to submit those back by September 12th or September 15th. And the last thing I'll note for next steps is we have a huge community event on September 12th that you'll be getting an invitation to, if you haven't already, to Brick South in Portland for a Changemaker event. And it's going to have our whole community there. All the readers that have participated in our process, grantees. It'll be an amazing time. All right. We have a whopping 5 minutes for questions, so we're probably not going to get through them all. But if there are 1 or 2 that might be helpful for everyone to hear, we do have some time. I mean, I have time after just to hang in this room too, if there are other questions you might have. And also Bree and I are totally available. Yeah.
Is there something in the comments that are made that might be, more helpful than others to, whoever reviews the comments eventually?
Yeah, so in the comments, oh, you mean, sorry, say that again, Philip. So,
In the comments section of the
Yeah.
review,
yeah,
is there anything that might be, more helpful than others for those that read the comments to see?
great question, Philip. Thank you so much for lifting that up. I would suggest some of it will depend on the question, but certainly depending on the audience. If you feel like what was written in the application wasn't terribly clear and could be clearer, something like that is helpful for the applicant, right? When we share back to them. But for the grant making advisory committee, helpful for them to know, do you feel like this work that they're describing, for example, is important in racial justice work as you understand it, and why? And why? Helpful to know, for example, if you have proximity to some of this work in your own work, helpful to bring some of that perspective in. It really is. So they get to know who's reading this, but also some of your lens, I think, can be really helpful. And everybody, who's signed up and we've done outreach are people that have shown commitment to this work. And we share that with the advisory committee. We share that with the applicants too. Okay. Also helpful if there's things that specifically are connected to some of those funding priorities that we've named, that may not necessarily be as visible. If a group's doing work to support, right, and they're describing things that support more marginalized communities within marginalized communities that, again, might not be as apparent. If they're doing work to support LGBTQ community and doing racial justice work, lift that up. Okay, lift that up for us. If they are doing work in new and innovative ways that you want to highlight, please note that. If you think there's potential there in terms of the organization that may not also be apparent from the application, but there are things there that you see in the application that make you feel like this is an organization that maybe is just getting started, but that the grant making committee really should give some attention to. We feel like at Maine Initiatives, we have a role to play in that regard. So if you see things that could be helpful to lift up, would be great. And lastly, I'll say, and just really appreciate this question, Philip, your observations, like specific things, just like giving any feedback, right? Specificity of that can be really helpful to point out specific things that they've said in their application. It allows people to go back and look further at that, at that part of the application.
Thank you, Julian.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Um, Any other questions? Yeah, Heidi? Oh,
So, I believe you, at one point you were going through, and one of the requirements of the organization was a cap of like $2.5 million. Can you just expand on that a little bit as why that was the cap?
sure. Yes, and I'm seeing that it's one. So if some of you have to hop, totally understand, and thank you for joining. If you do have a few more minutes and can stay, happy to sort of talk, and we'll answer that question now. But for those who have to hop, thank you for coming. Please reach out with questions. So Heidi, great question. So I want to note, I'll remark on that, and also around our sort of BIPOC-led definition too, that it will be helpful. So all the applications that you will receive, we've deemed to be eligible. That 2.5 million budget cap, and that for us is determined by most recent fiscal year expenses. We don't ask for a full budget you'll see on the applications. We just ask for most current fiscal year operating expenses and income. We started with a limit, I believe, of 1.5 million for the last 2 years. We've increased that to 2.5 million. Because we could see that there are some organizations that are potentially critical hub organizations in racial justice work that weren't being able to apply, or maybe just over that limit. In the third year as well of this 3-year commitment, we wanted to give an opportunity for maybe a little bit bigger of a pool as well, figuring that there are already 12 organizations that have been selected that aren't going to apply again. We also noted that there are organizations that may have received some COVID funding. And some of you may know this from your work, that's set to expire, for example, this year, right? Still showing up in their budget, but come next year, they're not going to have that same kind of support. So we wanted to create space for that. Then the other thing I'll just note too, we've made a caveat in our BIPOC-led eligibility, where if an organization meets not all of our requirements around that, they can explain, there's room to explain why. And sometimes what we've learned is organizations have decided strategically to be directed by BIPOC individuals, but to have leadership that doesn't identify as BIPOC, for just in terms of labor equity. You know, we've had, and this is, you know, learning for me, is that there are groups that say, yeah, our leadership takes direction from a council, you know, of leaders, but we believe that it's important in terms of labor equity for those people to be holding a substantial part of the labor in the organization. And just also appreciate that model, and we feel like it's important to bring that forward for people to read about. Doesn't mean necessarily they're going to get selected, but I think also learning in terms of our sector, helpful for people to see, oh, there's other ways of organizing that can still be led and serving BIPOC communities. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Amanda.
Julian, could you talk about what's offered to awardees in the cohort? Like over the 3 years of the grant, what does the cohort do? And just kind of wondering so there's a financial benefit to being a grantee, and then there's this, you know, cohort benefit. I'm wondering what are the kind of characteristics of that cohort benefit?
Certainly, great question. And this is something that's like developing real time with our cohort. We don't have a set plan of what that looks like. I mean, sometimes that can happen with funders. It's sort of, you're going to get funded, and then we're going to convene you, and we've got an agenda. We don't move like that. So some of the things that have happened, so it definitely starts at the grant making retreat. And like I said, that's an organizing space. So people are connecting there, and there have been collaborations that have occurred out of that space. We will be convening the cohort, for example, right before we have our Changemakers event this fall. So they get a chance to sort of to talk, to plan, to help sort of plan and design sort of the next stage of Grants for Change, our next sort of 3-year commitment. Yeah, has to do too with informing one another about the work that each other are doing, right? And the encouragement to show up for each other's work that we also can support through this. What else would I say around that? Yeah, yeah. And we've also in the past had like dedicated days of just rest. So we'll like rent out a retreat center, you know, bring in food, and it's like no agenda. Here's a day of rest for those who can, you know, if you can make it. We'll take care of transportation, all the things, and just a day of rest, right? So that's also something that we've done in the past. Yeah, thanks, James. So needed and necessary. But we're also open to that, to leaders from the cohorts telling us what they need. We've got resource library too, non-financial resource library that we make accessible, that kind of thing as well. Great question. Yeah, Anne.
I was just wondering, Julian, and thank you for all of this, but should we limit our impressions of the group to what we are reading? You're right, Maine is a very small state. We're likely to be talking to people who may know these organizations or know of them. What's your preference about the feedback that we give? What should we limit that to?
Sure, great question, Anne. So for each question, I would try to like stay focused on the question asked. And then at the end, there is a section for 2 things. Anything else about the application or the organization? So if you have knowledge, understanding, proximity to the organization that you want to share in that space, please do. Okay, super helpful. And that is a place that often grant making committee members will go and look, right? What else should we know about this group that may not be apparent in the application? If you also know about the group, if you have any sort of concerns about the application, again, people that are in proximity to work that we might not be, familiar with, please share that if you have concerns about the organization or application. And then we have a whole model of care around that too. How can we lean in towards that concern, not as a punitive way too, but maybe there's ways in which we can gather to resource around whatever concern that is. So that is also helpful in our process. I would also, this is kind of connected, but maybe separate. I would also recommend reading all 3 proposals before you start your review. And just to say, it's hard. Every time, it's a hard task to ask to read and review 3 applications. You haven't read all, 38, for example. But at the very least, read all 3 so you have a sense. We'll try to assign reads. I mean, it's a combination of random, but also we want to make sure you see a kind of a breadth of the work that's represented in the applicant pool. But yeah, recommend to read all 3 before you start reviewing one. Yeah. Thank you for the question, Anne. What else? Any other questions? Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. It's just to note, I talk like a lot of talking from me. So thank you for your attention. Hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully when we're in other spaces, yeah, that there is more. Hopefully you got to connect with folks today. But thank you for your attention around this. Yeah, again, hopefully help to resource this process for you. Reach out with other questions. Thank you to those, many of you I'm seeing have done this a number of times. So just thank you for being a part of this process. And for those who are new, like really welcome your feedback as well. This is totally iterative and we are learning every year and we make mistakes and we get better. So